I don't think we got our degrees before, and I don't think this hat is going to survive the affair. Wow. First, I'd like to thank President Smith, the board, and the faculty for this remarkable honor. If there's anyone more surprised than me to be up here, it would be anyone, maybe some of you out there, who knew me as a student when I was at Swarthmore. I use the term student quite loosely here. With a dual major in psychology and lacrosse, by the way. I like your red sashes, everyone. We didn't get those, but with that dual major and with the help of courses known affectionately as engineering for idiots and physics for poets, I was able to meet the science requirement. Courses where I could write papers rather than take exams decided by the professor kept my GPA safely above the danger zone. Ultimately, my father lost his $100 bet with my brother that I would never make it through college. But I was a good student in many ways that Swarthmore both facilitated and favored. As Marianne pointed out, the late 60s, early 70s were a time of warfare, civil wrongs, environmental degradation, so many other problems. And rather than look at those issues in isolation, Swarthmore asked us to take a more holistic view and see their interconnections. And I definitely bought into that. A smorgasbord of social science, literature, and history courses certainly contributed to my understanding. The readings were helpful, and I did a fair number of them, but the discussions, debates, and arguments in classes, and definitely outside of class, arguments in the best sense of the word, definitely helped. In the process, I gained confidence in what I knew and considerable awareness of all that I did not know. Ultimately, the underlying Quaker activist culture here encouraged us to use our knowledge and skills to go out into the world and to use those talents to take on some of the world's problems, failed models, and received wisdom.
I too would like to thank those who nominated us for this award, and also to the other honorees here today. Karama and Marianne, you have spent your lives dedicated to social change that impacts so many of us. And I think with really important essential principles of equity and sustainability. So I thank you so much for what you do. As to our award, we're honored as a pair, which is pretty unusual. We have worked in tandem throughout our lives across individual differences. I was a science major, I had to work, I had to go labs, Bill. But more importantly, we've worked across disciplines together, combining different ways of thinking, assessing, different perspectives on this world, and bringing our different skills to bear. Me as an ecologist and Bill as a social scientist. It's this combination of work that to me has been one of the most important keys to any success we feel in our chosen field of wildlife and wildland conservation. And we deeply appreciate this honor as a twosome. But back to Swarthmore. I came here as a small town girl, and this naturally beautiful campus, and I have to say change has come and it's even more beautiful than when I was here. And this thinking community offered me new ideas, new knowledge, new and unexpected life companions, and windows on the world that was big and complex and with so much still unknown. I studied biology, genetics, developmental, cellular, everything but ecology because it was a small school and didn't offer ecology at the time. But I learned many scientific facts, and also that it was okay to ask questions, to not have answers, to test ideas, to seek new ways of looking at life. I was encouraged to apply any of that knowledge gained. Go do something about it was the refrain from the college when we went on strike during the Vietnam War. Go do something.
Post-Swarthmore, 2 years as volunteer Peace Corps teachers in the Congo, brought new, novel contexts for us of environment, culture, and languages. Rural life for rural Africans was hard, the idea of wildlife conservation a luxury. Time to travel exposed us to the iconic landscapes of East Africa, sites of great biological diversity, wildlife spectacles unmatched anywhere on Earth. But all too often, around those centers of great biological wealth, there were also areas of great human poverty. The juxtaposition was jarring, raising issues of justice to be addressed. It also was an opening for me as a social scientist to make a contribution to conservation. And I have to say, conservation at that time, in the 70s, was a field that paid virtually no attention to local communities. They were either ignored or treated as the enemy. This was still the case in the late 70s when Amy and I went to Rwanda to address the critically endangered status of mountain gorillas, a population of mountain gorillas that was isolated in the Virunga volcanoes in East Central Africa at the borders of Rwanda, Congo, and Uganda. Western media, National Geographic at that time, brought very sympathetic images into people's living rooms on their TVs to see how calm and social gorillas were. But at the same time, a colonial era approach to conservation, which saw local people as the enemy, as potential poachers, and saw armed guards as the solution, was failing badly. Half the volcano's park had been cleared, and 40% of the gorillas were lost in the 20 years before Amy and I went there.
So, 5 years after graduating from Swarthmore, I was sitting in the midst of a family of mountain gorillas. My aim was to study the food and habitat needs of the population. Forest clearing, illegal hunting had reduced their number to barely 260 individuals, leading many to claim their extinction was inevitable. 2,000 hours of direct observation later, I had solid evidence that habitat wasn't limited and that the population could be sustained and even restored if they could be valued and protected. This early field work challenged me in many ways. Climbing mountains at high elevation, in the cold, the wet, the mud, tracking day after day alone on these mountain ridges, staying focused while gorillas ate massive amounts of food. But throughout, what struck me, and that was the experience, was far more than science. I often sat a few feet from wild, free, powerful creatures that let me into their world, who treated me as kin of some sort, in whose eyes I saw curiosity and concern, I saw awareness and attention, so much like my own. There is nothing like gazing into the eyes of a wild mountain gorilla. I saw youngsters wrestle and play, and sometimes I was invited to join them. I watched paternal care, both maternal and paternal, which had not been seen before. I saw a range of personalities from very reclusive to extroverted. It was a realm of existence so rarely experienced by anyone, and I felt tremendously privileged as a result. Gorillas opened my eyes and my heart to ever deeper recognition of the wonder and awe of life on this earth. My science was important in providing hope for the future of these gorillas, but Bill's work was transformational. He surveyed people from top government offices down to those who were working very, very small plots of land alongside the park. He found local people were not the enemy, and in fact, a majority were interested in protecting gorillas. At the same time, though, they saw no direct value from the park or these charismatic creatures that lived there. They needed jobs, they needed income, they needed a future for their children. So how could conservation be done with, by, and for these people?
So drawing on Amy's research, my surveys of local needs, our own interdisciplinary team, we worked with Rwandans at all levels, national, regional, down to, again, those farmers living on the park's edge, and helped to develop what was then a novel ecotourism program. People coming to visit for 1 hour, once a day, no more than 8 visitors in the company of a professional Rwandan guide to go see gorillas. It worked. With this effort and through the efforts of so many more over the years since then, Guerrilla tourism today brings in $25 million each year in direct visitor revenue to Rwanda, 10% of which is shared with local communities bordering the park. Thousands of new jobs have been created. An additional $250 million each year is estimated to be generated at the level of the regional and national economies. This revenue has been extremely important in terms of rebuilding Rwanda in the wake of its horrific 1994 genocide. And conservation today is proudly led by Rwandans at all levels. As for the gorillas, their population has more than doubled from 360 to nearing 700 now, and still climbing. After almost a decade in the field, we returned with our two young sons. We did produce other things while we were there. We returned to the States.
The fertile soils of Rwanda. Kevin, you know them well.
Volcanic soil, watch out, it'll get you. We returned to move into senior leadership positions in conservation nonprofits in the United States, starting with an African focus, expanding into North America, and ultimately dealing with global issues. We brought our experience from Rwanda to those positions, but not as a model in and of itself, but as an approach to listen, learn, collaborate, and especially pay attention to local people around those, in and around those areas, to bring them and their interests into the equation. And to open the windows in those organizations to new ideas, open the doors to new people. People who have been excluded in these bastions of, that have been long bastions of white male exclusivity. Open the door to more diverse colleagues, women, African nationals, and Native Americans.
I'm asked what it was like to be a woman in the field and in leadership positions. In our early work, gendered stereotypes meant that Bill was assumed to be the ecologist and I was the social person, right? When Bill was hospitalized after misbehaving with the silverback gorilla, I stepped right in without second thought, to some people's surprise. And later in staff meetings, I often found myself the only woman in the room. There were clear aspects of gender discrimination, but I have to say, mostly I got a kick out of it. I was there, I could speak, I could act, which is what had been expected of me here at Swarthmore. And we could hire more women. So, thank you. Look, this is my story, and every story is different. Each pathway to counter underrepresentation, to have a role, to have a voice, is individual. Discrimination remains, for sure, despite great strides that have been made, and I assure you they have been made. There are many more women now in conservation careers, many more women, and many more leaders who are women in conservation careers. But the pathway to change is, I think, far more difficult for people who can't hold their hat on. Could you hold that, please? For those of other races, other nationalities, other cultures, people especially who are in rural, marginalized areas. There is so much left to do. In the midst of such opportunities, though, I have to admit, I found myself shielding a portion of what drives me, what is me, which is this passion for the existence of the many wonderful, diverse forms of life on Earth. As a scientist, and particularly a woman scientist, I felt letting my sense of awe and wonder of these beings, letting that be more visible would possibly reduce my scientific credibility. It took me decades to let that out, to let the humanity in my work be visible. And I urge you, don't wait decades. Let it out. I encourage you to let who you are into your work right from the get-go.
So, ultimately, Amy and I have served in several positions of conservation leadership. Someday, many of you will be in comparable positions within your chosen field. It's a privilege. Be mindful of that privilege and its origins, but put it to good use. Through privilege, you'll be in positions to break down barriers to greater participation, to bring in new ideas and people, to challenge outmoded models and ways of thinking. Privilege is one of several key issues that students at the Yale School of Environment, where we've now been teaching for the past 10 years, privilege is one of their concerns and how they deal with it going out into the world. Another is complexity, the interrelated challenges of biodiversity loss, environmental injustice, economic inequality, and the existential threat of climate change. They and you face a far more tangled mess of problems than we confronted on leaving Swarthmore. For some, it hangs like a dark cloud over their personal and professional futures. But there's a source of light in this. Great complexity brings endless possibilities for action. For us, we added some novel elements to what was a fairly simple conservation equation, some social science, some applied ecology. But there are many more, today there are many more disciplines and career outlets: biological, social, technological, legal, arts and media of all forms, and the still too tentative greening of the business and financial worlds. All these provide entries for action and impact. You came here with much to offer. That's why you were admitted. And Swarthmore has certainly added greater knowledge and skills. So pick a field, follow your passion, engage, and do so with genuine openness, openness to different perspectives, openness to new possible partners, to, unusual collaborations, new relationships, and hopefully long-lasting partnerships.
And enjoy the wonder as you go. Thank you.